In level 2, I call that grocery freedom, because as your wealth goes from $10,000 at the beginning to about $100,000 by the end, if that was like, let's say your liquid net worth, right? So that's all, exclude your home equity, exclude your retirement accounts. If you have $100,000, the assumption is that your wealth is growing by 0.01% per day. And if you do that for a year, you take that and do it 365 days, that's about 3.7% per year. Right. And so this is an inflation adjusted return. I still think it's pretty conservative. I don't think anyone's gonna be like, oh my gosh, 3.7%. What a crazy assumption. Like, no, I think that's a conservative return. So what I mean is that if your wealth is creating that much per day, that's how much you can spend per day and keep your wealth the same, right? All else equal. Those higher on the wealth ladder, so let's say levels 4, 5, and 6, had far more of their assets in what I would call income producing assets. So stocks, bonds, retirement accounts, real estate, their own businesses, etc., right? They have over half of their assets in income producing assets. But in levels 1 to 3, those households on average have less than 25% of their assets in income producing assets. In level 1 specifically, most of their wealth that they have is in cash or it's in their vehicle, right? By the time you get to level 2, it's going to be in cash, their vehicle, and their home. The home's usually the big one, especially level 2, level 3. But as you kind of go past level 3 and get into like level 4 and above, that kind of switches because people have excess. And so, yeah, they own their home, whatever, but then they also have a retirement account. If you ask most financial people, like, oh, I've started late, what should I do? Everyone's like, you have to save aggressively, you have to work hard. Like, my take is actually a non-financial answer, which is like, start focusing on your health even more than before, like exercise more. Why am I saying that? Because I want you to get healthier so you have more time where you can work, right? You'll hit your mid 60s, you're not as healthy, you're probably gonna wanna retire, you don't have money. Like, because you started late, you're in a bad spot. So by exercising more, you extend your working life, so that gives you more time to save money. You get that time back that you didn't use earlier. That's one thing that's useful.
Welcome to Catching Up to FI, a podcast on mindset, money, and life for late starters of any age on their journey to financial independence. I'm Bill, and I'm a late starter.
I'm Jackie, and I'm also a late starter, and we're your host. We're here to help you on your journey to financial independence, no matter where you're starting.
We're going to talk to experts, other late starters, and explore topics related to our mission.
Join us as we catch up to FI together.
Hey, Jackie, guess what? It's Plutus Awards season, but our audience won't know what the Plutus Awards are. What are they?
Yay, woohoo! We are excited that we are in the running for several different categories for the Plutus Awards. And the Plutus Awards basically is given important recognition to independent content creators in the financial space. It's been around for 10 plus years at least, right? I can't exactly remember how long, but anytime I saw that a content creator won a Plutus Award, that was a big deal. And it demonstrated that they were great in what they were doing in terms of the financial space as an independent creator.
Yeah, I mean, this would mean the world to us if you would consider going on to the website plutus.awardsplatform.com. That's plutus.awardsplatform, one word, .com. We're up for about 7 categories, Jackie, and one we're really proud of is the best new personal finance content creator audio. Now, we started 2 years ago. We've had over 1 million downloads, but we're still allowed, because of a miss last year, to be up for this new content creator award. It would mean the world to us if you would consider voting in this category.
Yeah. And like you said, even though it's been 2 years, we're still considered new. We've got podcasts that's been out there for 10 plus years and they've gotten really good at it. So we're proud to be still considered being in the best new personal finance content. Now, also, we've got several other categories, and one of those is Content Creator of the Year audio. So this is another great one that we believe we're deserving of it. And if you think that we deserve that and you want to do a little give back, we would love it if you would nominate us for that category as well.
Yeah, and there's People Choice Awards as well, and we're up for the one for audio.
Yeah, and then we've got the Plutus Storyteller Award. Bill, you know, we have some great storytelling on this show that are from the voice of late starters. And then you and I have shared our own story, as well as Becky. So the Storyteller Award definitely spoke to me, so I wanted to make sure. I was so glad to have us on the list for that as well.
Yeah, I mean, your stories are a pivotal part of the show. We late starters are here together to learn from each other, and your stories are critical to get out there to the financial independence community. Another category that we're up for is best traditional retirement content. You know, we do give hardcore information. It isn't all softcore. We are also hardcore.
Yeah, not only that, Bill, but a lot of us that are getting a late start maybe a little bit older, where we are planning for traditional retirement. We all want to reach financial independence, but when it comes to the retirement piece, perhaps we are in those traditional retirement ages. So we talk about things like Social Security. We've had something about Medicare. We've had a lot of CFPs and other financial professionals that are talking about even the traditional part of it. So this was a great category to be a part of as well. Another one is one that's close to my heart, is best personal finance content for women. Our audience is 70+% women, and we have a lot of shows dedicated to that. We just recently had Carrie Carbonaro. I did a Women in Taxes webinar that I cross-pollinated to our platform, but speaking to women is a big part of our show and what we like to bring in.
Yeah, and lastly, in these categories, we're up for best personal finance content for underserved communities. We feel that the late starters are an underserved community. We are probably the only voice in the podcast world out there speaking to you, the catching up to fires, the late starters. This is a new thing for us, and we hope that you feel that you're being served.
Yeah, and if you think that, please support us in this way. We don't ask for much, and we certainly appreciate you tuning in every single Sunday and occasionally on Wednesdays. And if you think it's worthy of other people finding the show, please take the time to do it. I think there's a quick little registration, but you can get through it in 5 minutes. So if we could have 5 minutes of your time to do that, we would be so grateful. And you know, Bill, I also have the book Fire for Dummies and a little bit of my own platform. So I'm in the running as well for a few things, not competing with catching up to five, but one of my favorite. So if you want to support me as well, I'm under the best new personal finance content creator written for Fire for Dummies. So I'm pretty happy about that.
Yeah, also the best new personal finance book. And we all think that's the case. Fire for Dummies for life.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And I've shared a lot of the content from the book on the show, of course, but also I'm in the running for best financial advisor content. I am a CFP professional, so I got into that category. And then there's something called the Plutus Resilience Award. And I'm not sure if this is a new category or not, but this definitely spoke to me. I've openly shared my story to, get it out there, and hopefully it impacts other people or inspires other people by sharing my mistakes and things like that and how I bounce back. So resilience is a very important term for me, term of endearment, really. And then the last one, Bill, is best financial independence retire early content for Fire for Dummies. I literally wrote the book on financial independence and retire early. So that's the last one that I'm in. So for both Catching Up to Five and my book, we would love for you to take a minute and vote for these. Again, it's at plutus.awardsplatform.com. It has a quick little registration. You can be done in 5 minutes.
Yeah, you'll see this link in our newsletter. You'll see it in our show notes. And we just hope you feel as we do that we put out some stuff that is worth listening to. Hello, and welcome back to Catching Up to Five. I'm Bill Yount with Jackie Cummings Koski, and we are so excited to talk to today's guest about The Wealth Ladder, a new book coming out, Nick Maggiulli. Let me introduce him, Jackie, so we can rock into the show, because there's so much to talk about, right?
That's right. I'm looking forward to this.
All right. So Nick Maggiulli is a financial writer, data scientist, and chief operating officer at Ritholtz Wealth Management. He is best known for his popular blog of Dollars and Data, where he explores the intersection of personal finance and data analytics. And he is a man with charts and graphs out the wazoo. You've got to check out his blog because it will explain to you with hard data why things are the way they are in the world. His work has been featured in major publications such as the Wall Street Journal, CNBC, and the Los Angeles Times. In 2022, he published his first book, which I love, Just Keep Buying, a book that distills key investment principles into actionable strategies, which has been translated into multiple languages and has sold over 100,000 copies worldwide. His new book, as I mentioned, is The Wealth Ladder, proven strategies for every step of your financial life. This is important, folks, because whether we know it or not, we are all on this wealth ladder, and we would like to climb it to freedom. He breaks down wealth into 6 distinct levels, each requiring its own strategy with its own challenges as well. Nick holds a degree in economics from Stanford University and has built a reputation for using data-driven insights to simplify complex financial concepts and help individuals make smarter financial decisions. So, Nick, welcome to Catching Up to FI.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Jackie, for having me on. Appreciate it.
Nick wants to give us a shout out too. We like to do charity shout outs. And before we get started, Nick, tell us about the Malaria Consortium, which you'd like to support today.
So with charity stuff, I was like, what's the best use of like per dollar that I can use to save the most lives? And everything basically came down to either deworming or like bed nets for malaria prevention, like in Africa. I think you can save on average, if for every $1,200 or $1,300 you spend, you save someone's life, right? And so I don't know of a higher return that's out there. And of course, we can measure return in different ways. Is saving a life the best thing? I think it's pretty good, right? So in terms of the Malaria Consortium, it's like they use a lot of that money. They have very low overhead relative to other charities. And they use that money to do the most cost-effective, life-saving thing they can do, which is give out bed nets and things like that. I don't know all of the things they do, but I just know like per dollar spent, it's like the most effective thing out there. And I'm like so much about efficiency and all that stuff. And so I'm very pro the work they do. So if I have to pick a charity, that's what I'm throwing in with.
All right. We will drop that in the show notes. And I am familiar with that charity. There was someone else that was actually supporting it as well. So I donated it on his behalf. So thank you. We will put that in the show notes. So Nick, we share something in common. We have an interesting perspective on $2 bills. They're pretty cool. And with your new book, I love the cover, by the way. And if you're on YouTube, you can see that. We'll show it throughout the show. But you've got dollar, you've got currency. You got a 20 or 50, a 5, a 10, and a 1. But you're missing a $2 bill. That's my thing. So how are you using the $2 bills?
This is kind of under wraps, so I'm hoping this will come out after the fact. But basically, I posted about the book cover on LinkedIn, and someone's like, oh, it'd be so cool. Like, I want the $2 bill, a special edition of the book with a $2 bill on the cover. And then someone's like, oh, it'd be a great pre-order bonus. So I think what I'm going to try and do something where I either include the $2 bill for those that get a signed copy, or at least if I can't do that, I'm going to just send it out to people at my contact list that have been following my work for years. And I'll put like a special $2 bill bookmark in there. So that's the thinking. But I know you guys sent me a $2 bill, so I can show this to the camera. You sent me a nice thank you gift for coming on the show. And so I have this one, which I'm going to keep for myself as my lucky $2 bill. So appreciate that.
Yeah, those are the gifts that we love sending to our guests. And I got this uncut sheet of $2 bills behind me. So I am especially crazy about the $2 bills. It was actually the first time I learned about saving. So there is a little bit of a story behind it. But we want to get into a little bit about the book. And you, Nick, your story is so fascinating. So you are about the numbers. I started reading your blog of dollars and data, and I think that's how most people know you. Bill, is that how you know Nick as well?
Yeah, I mean, he is all about proving things that people circumstantially talk about and whether they're valid or not. And I'm very impressed with your ability to take hard data and make it accessible to the public in a sort of understandable format. And your blog really does that very well, as do your books. So give us briefly, Nick, the rungs of the ladder so that we can build the construct of this talk today.
Yeah, so I call them levels, and the only reason I call them the levels on the wealth ladder instead of rungs, it didn't sound as nice to me as levels, even though technically it's a rung on a ladder, but I'll talk about the 6 levels on the wealth ladder. And so these levels are based on net worth. So your net worth, as just a reminder, I know most of your listeners probably know how to calculate their net worth. It's very important for reaching financial independence. But just as a reminder, it's all of your assets minus all of your liabilities. So that's like everything you own, your car, your house, your bank accounts, your stocks, etc., minus any debt you have, your mortgage, credit card, student loans, etc. So you have that number, your net worth, and then you're going to fall into one of the 6 levels. Level 1 is less than $10,000 in net worth. Level 2 is $10,000 to $100,000. Level 3 is $100,000 to $1 million. Level 4 is $1 million to $10 million. Level 5 is $10 million to $100 million. And lastly, level 6 is over $100 million. And the thing that makes this ladder principle very easy to remember is once you know one of the levels, if you just memorize any one of the levels, you can back out the rest by multiplying by 10 or dividing by 10. And why did I use this kind of a logarithmic like 10x change? Because I think that's the size of the change you need in wealth to see a really large life impact, right? So like going from like $0 to $10,000, that will change someone's life. Like someone has no money to 10,000, they will feel a weight lifted. They're kind of out of level one. They kind of have financial security. Like that is a huge change for people. The next big change, once again, I think is going in past 100,000, right? And we can keep going up the ladder from there. One last thing I'll say, in terms of how this breaks out in U.S. households, around 20% of households are in level one. That's less than $10,000. Around 20% of households are in level two. That's $10,000 to $100,000. 40% of households are in level three, which is $100,000 to $1 million. So that's your typical middle class. And then about 18% of households are in level four. That's $1 to $10 million. And then the top 2% is level 5 and level 6. And I think level 6 only has like 10,000 households. So it's a very, very small percentage of individuals that make it over $100 million in wealth.
Each of us has our own personal wealth ladder journey. And so that we can understand you a little bit better, you started somewhere on this wealth ladder and you're somewhere now. Can you take us through your own personal journey a little bit, for maybe even childhood, with regards to your first lessons in money to where you are today and how you climbed this ladder?
Yeah, so my parents met at McDonald's. My father was a cook. My mother ran the drive-thru. They met there. They had me a few years after that in the late 80s. They were in level one, probably level two-ish within a few years because they started saving money and stuff. And you also include family. When I think about levels, especially like if you grew up like lower middle class or middle class, I don't always say you're in level one unless you're truly like in abject poverty. And so if you have a family that has some wealth, I still kind of can count you as that as a child. Even like I didn't grow up in level one, even though my net worth didn't exceed $10,000 until like after my first year of working. I don't want to consider myself level one because I never went hungry. I never dealt with what level one people in level one actually deal with. So I would say I grew up in a level two household in the United States. My parents divorced when I was like 6 years old. They declared bankruptcy, right? So a lot of bad things happened, unfortunately, on the financial side. I graduated from school. I got very lucky. I got into Stanford University in 2008, went there for 4 years. While I was there, I got to meet so many more people like across the wealth ladder. And what I mean by that is they had very different upbringings. Most of them are level three. There's a good portion that probably had level four upbringings. Most of the people I met had been to Europe already, right? And you have to realize like half the students are from California, so that's quite a trek. And while I was there, I just got to meet people and I learned a lot more about like the corporate world that I just didn't know anything about. Like I had a friend, and I talk about this in the wealth ladder. My buddy Michael came to me. He's like, "Hey, have you applied for your internship for the summer?" I was like, "What?" It was my sophomore winter. He's like, "Yeah, you have to recruit now for the internship between sophomore and junior year." And I was like, "Why?" He's like, "If you don't get that internship, then it's going to be really hard to get an internship between junior and senior year. And if you don't get that internship, then you're not going to get a job out of college. You get an internship between sophomore and junior year. That leads to an internship between junior and senior year, and that leads to your job offer. So basically, by the first quarter of senior year, that you have a job waiting for you 7-8 months later when you graduate." It's so crazy that he knew all this, right? I had never heard this. I didn't grow up with this. My parents didn't graduate from college. Like, I don't have a background in any of that. But just being exposed to that allowed me to learn more how it works and like apply myself. I didn't really have a resume at the time, so I had to go in a resume building mode. I started applying for all these research assistant positions at Stanford. I worked part-time while I was there, built my resume, and then I finally got a decent internship and I went from there. So got into data science, did that for a while in consulting. And then from there, I joined Ritholtz Wealth Management, which is the current firm I'm at. And I started as a data scientist. I'm now the COO, so I help with operations there. But in terms of climbing the levels, when I first started working out of college, I was in level 2. I was there for a while. I eventually got into level 3 just from saving. And then to get into level 4, that's basically when I started doing content. And then only really around 2020 did I start to make money off that content. And I put out books and all these other things. And it's not that the books or any of the content would have gotten me into level 4 or my job would have gotten me into level 4. It's just together, like having one or the other is fine. I would have gotten to level 4 eventually. Like if I never had any of this content stuff, I still would have gotten there. I just would have got there in like my late 40s instead of my mid 30s. So I think based on my projections, that's the only thing. I kind of just collapsed time a little bit and got there a little bit sooner than I thought I would have. So that's kind of the quick story of how I moved through the levels.
I thought it was real interesting, Nick, when you were talking about growing up. Me and Bill were having this discussion before you came on about how does the level you were born into impact you? And do you count yourself in the level that your family's in? So it sounds like, yes, you would do that, because I grew up poor. So I grew up in level 1. But you said yours was like maybe level 2, level 3 or something like that. And it seems like it did impact you from the school that you went to and things like that. Of course, there was things that you didn't know, but it's just interesting to see what an influence the level that we were born into has on how we are moving up the ladder. So thank you for sharing that. I didn't know a lot of that stuff about you. So you did go to school to be a data scientist. That was your major?
I majored in economics. I ended up working in something called economics consulting, because I was basically deciding between management consulting and economics consulting. Management consulting is the one that most people have heard of, like McKinsey, Bain, BCG, all that stuff. Everyone knows those names. It's obviously much harder to get in there, but I didn't like how they were trying to project the future. Like, I think it's very difficult to do. I think it's not something that's as rigorous. And economics consulting is looking at the past and saying, hey, this thing happened and there's litigation involved and we have to analyze all this data. And I said, you know what? I want to do the thing that's more fit for my skill set and what I enjoy. And it's more data heavy and it's going to make me a much better data scientist. That's kind of the route I followed. I said, I'm going to do that. I don't think going management consultant to data scientist is really a thing. So I took the litigation or economics consulting route. And that's kind of how I got into doing all the data stuff. And then I love personal finance. So I just married that. I started writing about it, started putting data. And that was kind of my edge initially, because like anyone can just put their opinion out there. But like if I can go dig through the data and show something interesting, I think that kind of gave me a little bit of an edge when I first started writing in 2017.
What's interesting to me, too, is you started at many levels in the wealth ladder at 0. Did you have student loans? Were you actually sub-0, or were you able to get through school without student debt?
So Stanford had a very generous financial aid policy, which they announced like in early, I think 2008. Like they literally announced it before like the recession hit. And that's why I think they were like, oh, we shouldn't have done this. But in late 07, I found out and I got in early. And because of that, like they announced this new financial aid policy, which was like, if your parents make less than $100,000 a year, you don't pay tuition. And if they make less than $60,000 a year, you don't pay room and board. So for all 4 years, I had no tuition. And then for 3 of the 4 years, I had no room and board. So I only had 1 year where I had to pay room and board because my parents made like slightly over 60K. It's kind of a sliding scale. So I didn't have to take loans. Like I asked, so I had some family that helped out, but they had to pay $5-6 grand. And so they helped out and we got it covered and all that, but I didn't have to take out debt. So that was like a nice, very lucky privilege I got because I happened to get into a school that just rolled out this incredible financial aid policy. So I basically started at 0. But once again, I wouldn't consider myself level 1 despite that.
That brings up the question, too, because you talk about spending, earning, and investing paths up the wealth ladder. You don't have a chapter on debt and its impact on the wealth ladder. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Of course. I think there's a lot of studies that show if you have mortgage debt, like people don't have the same psychological impact from holding a mortgage as they do with like student loans or credit card debt, where the interest rates are higher. It's more likely to keep growing over time, et cetera. And with housing, most people just get the mortgage, and at least when rates were lower, it wasn't a problem. Now it's a little bit more difficult with rates going up to being 7% on a 30-year fixed, right? So that's one of the things. But I think with debt, if you have debt and you have a negative net in your level 1, like I think a lot of the stuff still applies regardless if you have debt. If you have debt and you're like level 3 or something, it's probably because you have a mortgage and you still have a positive net worth, obviously. So I think it's more about the actions you take in level 1 are going to be the same regardless if you have debt or not. Like you got to try and get rid of the debt as quickly as you can, especially the high interest debt. And then you got to start building wealth from there. And we can get into different ways to do that, different things you can rely on that aren't just financial in nature.
Nick, I'd like to hear a little bit about the research that went into this book, because you're the data guy. Before I even picked up the book and read through it, I already knew that it was going to be well researched. You're going to cite your sources, and we get to actually look at the numbers and what went into you creating this wealth ladder framework. So can you talk to us a little bit about that? Like, what's the basic of the book that really supports your assertions and this whole wealth ladder framework you came up with?
So actually, I came up with it from a Jay-Z lyric, believe it or not. Jay-Z says, what's 50 grand to someone? I'm not going to say the actual lyric because he curses, but he says, what's 50 grand to someone like me? Can you please remind me? At the time he wrote that, he was worth 500 million. So I just did the math. I'm like, that's about 0.01%. And that little thing, which I didn't think much about at the time, I was like, oh, wow, that's like a trivial amount of money. What if I could like just scale that? Like that's what a trivial amount of money is to someone, right? For him, that's trivial. But for me, what's 0.01% of my wealth? And then I can kind of back that out. And I use that in kind of when talking about how much you can spend and things like this. Like, what's a trivial amount of spending for you? I just take 0.01% and multiply by your net worth, right? But that's where it actually started. I had that kind of thing. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then I went and someone else had this idea about like these levels of freedom, spending freedom. And so I took those different things, I kind of married it together, and I created the wealth ladder. I wanted to do the 10x differences because I thought it made a lot more sense and it's easier. There have been a lot of people that have done like, oh, the levels of wealth and this and that, but they're really hard to memorize. They didn't map as well onto like the US economic classes. Like this maps, I actually show like 20% level 1, 20% level 2, 40%, that is the middle class, is level 3, right? And then level 4, that's about 18%, that's the upper middle class. And then the top 2% are like basically the super rich, or the rich and the super rich. That's level 5 and 6. And so it just came about from like that random observation, pulling data, looking at it. And for a lot of this data, I used the Survey of Consumer Finances from the Federal Reserve. And then for looking at like how wealth changes over time, I use the panel study of income dynamics from the University of Michigan. And their data is really good because they're following the same set of households. So instead of saying, how is aggregate wealth changing? I'm saying, how is individual household wealth changing over time? So I could follow people over decades and see how they built wealth and say, hey, if you're in level 2 today, what's the probability that you're going to be in level 3 in like 10 years or 20 years? And that's in the book, right? All these little things are kind of in there just to kind of give you an idea of how do people build wealth? Like, what's their income look like? How long does it take them to move up the wealth ladder, et cetera?
I like this rule of 0.01% because you talk about if you have difficulty spending according to your wealth level, then the most expensive thing you own is your ego. Are you spending according to your wealth level or your income level? And there's a big difference between, say, net worth, liquid net worth, and income. And you take us through how the 0.01% level applies maybe to each level?
Yeah, so in level 1, you don't really have much spending freedom because you just don't have a lot of money. It's very obvious. In level 2, I call that grocery freedom because as your wealth goes from $10,000 at the beginning to about $100,000 by the end, if that was like, let's say your liquid net worth, right? So that's all, exclude your home equity, exclude your retirement accounts. If you have $100,000, the assumption is that your wealth is growing by 0.01% per day. And if you do that for a year, you take that and do it 365 days, that's about 3.7% per year. Right. And so this is an inflation adjusted return. I still think it's pretty conservative. I don't think anyone's gonna be like, oh my gosh, 3.7%. What a crazy assumption. Like, no, I think that's a conservative return. So what I mean is that if your wealth is creating that much per day, that's how much you can spend per day and keep your wealth the same, right? All else equal. Now, of course, if you do this math, right, okay, let's say I have $100,000, right? Using the 0.01% rule, that's only $10 a day. You're like, I can only spend $10 a day. No, obviously you have to have income to cover your other spending. This is the $10 a day marginal decision, right? Because I think when people have spending decisions, when they're like, oh, should I do this or that? Like, they're doing it on the margin, right? Like, you're at the grocery store and you're like, oh, can I buy these? Can I get the cage-free eggs instead of the standard eggs? It's like $1 more, it's $2 more, whatever it is. I think this is like, yes, you can. If your net worth is over $20,000, then that $2, it's trivial to you, so you can make the purchase, right? So that's where I'm trying to go with the 0.01% rule, right? And so by the time you get into level 3, I call that restaurant freedom, because for a net worth of $100,000 to $1 million, that marginal spend is anywhere from $10 to $100 by the time you get to $1 million in net worth. And so obviously your income matters. Everyone knows that, like, your income and your spending matter. The problem is income can be fickle. So I wanted a way of spending money that allowed you to have some lifestyle creep so you can spend more over time. However, only after you've demonstrated financial discipline and built wealth. So it's like, hey, look, I got to $100,000 in wealth. Now I can spend a little bit more. And now when I go to a restaurant, I can kind of maybe get a nicer entree. I don't have to worry about, oh, it's $10 more for the salmon than the burger. Or like, I don't know if I want to spend that $10. Like, no, you've demonstrated some financial discipline, get the salmon. That's what I'm saying.
Well, what's interesting is you are now the father of the 0.01% rule, the Jay-Z rule, should we call it maybe. Yeah. And so we've had Bill banging on about the father of the 4% rule. It's interesting how your 3.7% annual return almost is synonymous with the 4% rule. Is that just an accident?
I didn't realize it at the time. Remember, Jay-Z said this, then I said, okay, it's close enough to 0.01%. I was like, I'll just use that. And then I didn't realize, like, well, what is that like on a daily basis? Like, I didn't think about time when I came up with it. So I was like, let's try and just say, let's say you do that every day, right? Every day you can have one marginal spending decision like that. And I was like, oh, that just turned out to be 3.7%. That's conservative. Yeah, it's around the 4% rule. That's great. And that's coincidental, but nothing to do with that at all. So it just came out that way.
Well, that's also the latte factor. Now we know what the latte factor is. When can you get that extra latte of $5 to $10? Well, you have to have a certain wealth to do so. And we spend based on income in the United States, and we assume debt based on income, and we're not looking at wealth. You're flipping on its head and making us look at it completely differently, right?
Income definitely matters. I don't want to be like, oh, it doesn't matter what your income is. Like, no, of course your income matters. But let's just say I'm trying to come up with rules or ways to get people to allow themselves not to worry about certain types of spending. And so I think this is a very conservative approach. Hey, if once you have over $100,000 in wealth, you'll never have to worry about what you buy at the grocery store again. Once you have over $1 million, order what you want at the restaurant. Besides like the really crazy bottles of wine, you can get anything you want and don't worry about it. And in level 4, that's 1 million to 10 million. That's what I call travel freedom, right? You start travel freedom. By the time you're at 10 million, you can get business class every time. Don't worry about it. Can't fly private. That's not full travel freedom. It's almost there. But you see my point. Like the whole idea is just like, as you're building wealth, give yourself some mental freedom. Stop beating yourself up about nickel and diming every single thing. And I think that's not a good way to go through life. And so I tried to come up with a rule that was just going to make it easier for people.
Yeah, I like the grocery store analogy because I remember when I was in college, iPhones weren't around at that time, but I had a little calculator because I had to add up stuff. Every now and then I had to put something back and you just sort of trigger that memory. But I haven't had to think about that in a really, really long time for decades. And thank goodness I don't have to think about it anymore. The analogies, I think, does help a lot for people to kind of realize and put things in perspective.
You talk about level 5, most of us will never reach, being housing freedom. But we look at housing level most of us will never reach. I see your wealth ladder as kind of like overcoming the gravitational force of getting to the moon or to orbit. And when you get to orbit, you're kind of at financial freedom where you have a sustained orbit. But we're trying to launch our spaceship and get, whether it be level 3, level 4, where we reach freedom, that's what most of us are searching for. And we need to put in the energy in the fuel to get there. I mean, mine is kind of a space analogy, whereas yours is a ladder analogy.
And I think the thing that, if I'm being honest, like you guys do much better with financial independence, your spending matters. If you're someone that spends $150K a year, that's very different than someone that spends $40K a year, right? And so to be like, the levels matter, but to get to that FI, spending $150K a year, you're going to have to be deep into level 4. You can probably get to FI either very barely into level 4, even in level 3 if you spend a lot less, right? It depends on your costs. And so that definitely matters. I don't want to like overlook that. I'm just trying to come up with a general framework that I think works most of the time.
And you mentioned earning, and people in our late starter audience talk about, well, I earn 5 figures, I earn 6 figures, and earning your way up the wealth ladder. Interestingly, how much people earn broke down almost equally across certain income levels. Can you take us through those income levels? And I can help you with that if you need to.
So I'm just going to talk through the levels, and each level I'm going to read the median U.S. household income, right? And so I'm not going to repeat the wealth, like how much wealth is in each level. I'm assuming by now you guys can figure that out. So level 1 median household income is $32,000. Level 2 median household income is $48,000. Level 3, $83,000. Level 4, which is now upper middle class, that's roughly $200,000. Level 5 is $724,000. That's people with 10 to 100 million. And then level 6 is $4.3 million median household income. And so another piece of this, though, is like wealth and income are kind of the strongest relationship in personal finance I've seen. Like there's very few households that have high wealth and low income, or low income and high wealth. It just doesn't really happen, right? Because once you have wealth, it's very easy to turn that into income, or you invest it in something in general. You buy an index fund, you buy a treasury bill, whatever you end up owning, it's going to create income, right? So it's like these things, it's kind of like a flywheel where once you start to have the wealth, it just starts building on itself. I saw this tweet recently. It was like, if your investment portfolio earns more than you do, is your job a side hustle? Which is kind of a very funny thing, but this is something that starts to happen in kind of like level 4, at least, definitely. Or if you have a lower income, it can start happening in level 3, but that's kind of what's happening here with that correlation.
And then you talk about the income by wealth level, that somehow it broke down in quartiles where 25% earned less than $35,000 and 25% earned 35 to 70,000 K, and 25% earned 70 to 140, and then the last 25%, the last quartile, earned more than 140. And Jackie speaks to this, where she never earned more than 5 figures, and she launched into level 4 in a period of about 10 to 15 years. So if you get these things right, you can really supercharge your journey to a sustainable orbit, as I might say.
Yeah, exactly. That data, it's approximated. It's not exactly $70,000 is the median. It's like 72 or something, but I'm trying to make it easy for people to remember. And so I'm doing a lot of rounding here. It's going to be much easier to remember the round numbers, but yeah. So only 25% of US households earn more than $140,000. So despite what you see on Instagram and Twitter or whatever, or LinkedIn, like only a minority of households earn more than 150K a year. And this data is from 2022/2023. It's kind of both years. But the data is probably slightly higher now. I don't think the incomes have gone up that much since then.
Yeah, and Nick, you mentioned one of your primary data sources was the Survey of Consumer Finances, and I've used that for a lot. So I'm going to drop that in the show notes, but I love that you keep going back to that. Those numbers and that data is sliced and diced all kinds of ways. So I appreciate the fact that you have kind of put it in a way that people can actually remember it and use this as a part of your framework. What about the investing part, investing up the wealth ladder?
Yeah, so the biggest thing I noticed about investments across the wealth ladder is, in general, those higher on the wealth ladder, so let's say levels 4, 5, and 6, had far more of their assets in what I would call income producing assets. So stocks, bonds, retirement accounts, real estate, their own businesses, etc., right? They have over half of their assets in income producing assets. But in levels 1 to 3, those households on average have less than 25% of their assets in income producing assets. In level 1 specifically, most of their wealth that they have is in cash or it's in their vehicle, right? By the time you get to level 2, it's going to be in cash, their vehicle, and their home. The home's usually the big one, especially level 2, level 3. But as you kind of go past level 3 and get into like level 4 and above, that kind of switches because people have excess. And so, yeah, they own their home, whatever, but then they also have a retirement account. They also have stocks. They may also have real estate, or they may have their own business, right? Whatever it is. It's funny, when I wrote the first book, Just Keep Buying, the mantra was the continual purchase of a diverse set of income producing assets. I wrote that a long time ago, never seen this data, whatever. And then I go and in chapter 3 of the wealth ladder, I break out like how much cash do households hold across each level? And you can see that, right? And okay, what about vehicle wealth? What about stocks, etc.? And when you put it all together, you realize like those with more wealth just have so much more of their assets in things that are generating income for them. That's actually making them wealthier. And so it's this kind of cruel irony that wealth generates more wealth. But that's what the data shows. And it's good to see that because it doesn't mean you're going to get to level 6 if you allocate like someone in level 6 for the record. But you're going to probably get closer to level 6 if you have most of your assets are income producing versus non-income producing. And so that's kind of the main takeaway there that I just happened to rediscover even though I kind of had this philosophy beforehand and the data showed it as well.
Yeah, that reminds me of something my dad used to say all the time. He would say the rich get richer, and it's true according to what you just said, and it makes sense. And so I think there's a lot of really good nuggets in just that statement of the type of assets that people invest in as they're growing their wealth, because if you've just got cash and cars, nothing is appreciating. Maybe your income will, but hopefully you will introduce other asset classes. But if you don't, therein lies the problem of not being able to sort of move up the ladder or make some kind of progress.
So Nick, let's dive into each of these levels a little bit more and talk about opportunities, challenges. I lived a paycheck to paycheck life as a high income professional where my income may have been level 4 income, but I was still living paycheck to paycheck. A lot of our audience may start as Becky Hepping did, my prior host, where their wealth level is 0. And she retired after 13 years with a wealth level of 1.3 million. So you can do this, but what are the challenges and opportunities at level 1?
So in level 1, the thing I talk about the most is that your bad luck is amplified. Bad luck, simple thing that's an annoyance for someone in level 3 or level 4. Let's say your tire blows out, your tire's flat, can't get to work, right? That simple thing that's just like, oh, I got to pay someone to fix this and then everything's fine. That can derail you financially in level 1. You can't get to work. You could lose your job. You lose your job. You start going into credit card debt. Who knows? It could just become a tailspin. If you look at the data, like 10% of the US population is responsible for like the vast majority of financial distress events, like getting behind on their mortgage, getting behind on credit card bills, like all of these bankruptcies. It's a very small percentage of people that kind of fall into this. And I think once you fall into it, it's very difficult to get out. So like, obviously, if I could wave a magic wand, like never get into such a situation. But if you're just in level 1, maybe you're not in that situation, you're at 0, you want to try and build that a little bit of safety, a little bit of redundancy in your life. And now, how do you do that? That's a great question. The catchphrase I use, or the subtitle for that chapter, which is on level 1, is like, atypical results require atypical actions. And now I'm not trying to be like a grind set hustle. Like I don't really support that in general. I think the only time where I would support that is if you are in a dire financial situation. Like you have to do everything you can to just get to safety. And then after that, like take your foot off the gas. I'm not a big hustle all the time, work 24/7. I don't support that at all. I think if you're in a really tough situation, you're going to have to make some sort of sacrifices to get out of that. It's really difficult, right? And the other thing I mentioned in level 1 to get out is to rely on your network. Like think about the non-financial thing. We like to measure wealth just with what do you have in your bank account or whatever. I think wealth is much more broad than that. And I think your network, your friends, your family, whoever can help you out to just help you save some money, like that's what you can rely on early on to kind of get out of that situation. I think that's probably the most important thing. And obviously every situation is different, but that's kind of the overarching theme is don't let bad luck derail your financial plans.
And with regards to level 2, you speak to this because education here is the key to climb out of level 2. You said you were born into a level 2 family and you leveraged your academic prowess into scholarships and financial aid at Stanford and graduated debt-free. Tell us a little bit more about the challenges and opportunities of level 2.
Yeah, so I really think level 2 is the place where like the difference in the trajectory of your income is going to determine where you end up, right? And so you think about the median household income for someone in level 4, for a household in level 4 is $200,000. So that could be either 2 six-figure earners or just one person making $200K basically, right? And you think about like those types of jobs, you generally need an education. I'm not going to say there's no jobs where you don't need one. If you don't need an education, you need some sort of skills, a very valuable skill set that you can charge a lot for. Whatever it is, like there's going to be something where like you need some sort of skill to kind of get to that income level. And so when you realize that, like the difference in trajectory just on your income, like once you're in level 2 is probably going to determine whether you get to level 3 or level 4 and how quickly, right? That's the difference. And like one of the biggest myths in personal finance is that you can cut your spending is how you get wealthy. And like, don't get me wrong, that can help. If you have a really high income and your spending is crazy, like those people do need to cut their spending, right? But for most people, if you look at the data, overwhelmingly, it's income that's driving the change in wealth, and it's not necessarily their spending habits, right? I mean, spending matters, especially on the margin, but as I tried to describe, like the people in higher levels just have higher income, right? And so that's what's kind of driving them, makes it so much easier to save. And so it's the strongest relationship in personal finance. And so I think focusing on education so you can eventually have a higher paying job or even have a side hustle that's bringing in extra money, whatever it is, there's a lot of options out there. Those are the things that help you kind of move out of level 2.
Yeah, and this level 2 is grocery freedom. And I do have a lot of people asking me, they don't know how to get traction. They don't know how to get out of this. I have nothing saved, let's say level 1, level 2. And I always pose the question to them, do you think this is a permanent state? And you gave a lot of tips on how do you make that movement. If school is not for you, college or whatever, you mentioned a skill. Maybe you're a roofer, HVAC, maybe you open a small business. So on the income side, you got to get that income up because you talked about how tight the correlation is between income and building that wealth. That was the grocery one. So level 3, now this was the one that you called restaurant freedom. So talk us through that.
So yeah, the restaurant freedom, the idea is the marginal spending at a restaurant is going to be anywhere from, let's say, $10 to $100, which is 0.01% of 100,000 to up to $1 million, right? That's where that marginal spend comes in. But when I think about level 3, the challenge is there. I think it can be overspending on big ticket items. I know I just said spending doesn't really matter all that much, but the difference between level 3 and level 4 is not as large as people think. Even though the financial difference could be large, I think lifestyle isn't as big as we think. Like, yes, in level 4, which is the upper middle class, you probably live in a slightly nicer neighborhood. You probably sit in a slightly nicer seat on the plane. Like, I can go through everything, but their lifestyles are very similar. Like, they're working probably 9 to 5. They probably have a car, maybe have a Lexus versus a Toyota. Like, their lifestyle's just slightly fancier. That's it. You have a 10x jump in wealth and your lifestyle's just like slightly better. It's not like, oh my gosh, the people in level 4 are not flying private, for the record. That is not happening. I mean, maybe if you get close to 10 million, you can start to fly private once in a while, but if you actually look at the data, private flight really starts to take off in level 5, specifically when you get to around $20 million. There's a guy named Preston Holland that's like the private jet guy. He knows all the data on this, and it doesn't happen in level 4. I'm just going to say basically doesn't happen. So for the most part, like, you guys are on the same plane, you live probably in adjacent neighborhoods, maybe your neighborhood's slightly nicer, but like your lifestyle isn't that different. So I think that what's causing a lot of this is like people in level 3 overspending to try and look like they're more in level 4. And I think that can hold people back. And so I think it's just something to keep in mind. Like, hey, I don't need to do this because like your lifestyle is not going to be that much better. Like I'm in level 4 and my lifestyle is not that much better than someone in level 3. I'm getting in the TSA line like everyone else and doing my thing. At the end of the day, like, yes, I have a little bit more financial freedom. I can probably go and say, hey, you know what? I want to take a step back and maybe do something different with my career. I have that freedom that I probably wouldn't have had in level 3. So there are some big things that level 4 does give you. But in terms of your lifestyle, it's not as big of a change as someone would say.
What's interesting to me about spending is it's kind of like chutes and ladders. You climb your way up the ladders, but the chutes would be kind of spending. We hear about all these high income people that spend their way back down the ladder. And so spending is both a superpower and a curse in these levels, and you've got to watch that. Now, in level 3, you talk about that as being the focus of investing. And in your other book, Just Keep Buying, I want a quick little sidebar on a couple of things that you may think of differently with regards to investing. And one of the things that you're a little bit famous for, maybe controversial about, is your thoughts about a 401k and maxing out your 401k. Can you talk to us about why your thought process on this may be a little bit different from our own audiences?
Yeah, so when I was in my early 20s, I tried to read every single book, every single blog post I could on personal finance. And there was probably somebody out there, but I don't remember a single person saying not to max your 401k. Every single one. There was like 5 out of 5 finance professionals say max out your 401k. And that's what I did. As soon as I was able to, I had a decent income coming out. I couldn't do it my first few years, but like I think my 4th or 5th year, I was able to start maxing out my 401k, and I did it for 4 or 5 years. And then at some point, I'm living in New York City. Real estate got so expensive, and I'm just like, wait, I have this money that's sitting in here. And so I could take some out, and you can take 50K out for a house purchase or whatever. But I'm like, I put way more than that in there. And I'm like, I shouldn't have locked this up. And so I think the issue I had was personally, I should not have given up my optionality for that extra, right? So I think everyone should always go up to the match. If your employer's handing, and if they say, okay, we'll match you all the way up to your max, great. But if your employer's matching, like get up to the match. It's considered free money. I don't think anyone's debating that. I think it's above the match. The question is, when I actually ran the numbers, you get about, let's say, 0.75% a year, right? And that assumes like really no 401k fees and stuff. If your 401k has higher fees than normal, that can go down. And if your 401k fees are over 0.75% a year, then you can lose even more than that, right? I don't think it's the right choice for everyone. I think it's still great for a lot of people, but just think about it. I just want to be a dissenting voice a little bit, say like, hey, is this really the right choice? Let's really think this through, because I went and I did that and I kind of regret it. I wish I had less money in my 401ks and IRAs and I had a little bit more outside. Now it seems like that's even more important, because with rates where they are, I'm gonna have to basically put down a really massive down payment, or I might even have to buy a home in cash in a few years instead of just borrowing like I normally would have. So it doesn't matter in a low rate environment, but when rates are 7%, I don't want to borrow at 7%. So I have to go and save extra. And so I have to have much more money outside of my qualified accounts. And I think that's why I kind of push back on it, because I can't foresee the future and I didn't really plan ahead enough. And so just another opinion out there. I'm not saying it's wrong for everyone, but just something to think about.
I like your dissenting voice about 401ks. I wouldn't say I made a mistake with it, but I retired early. I was 49 and I had some in a brokerage account, but the vast majority was in a 401k. So of course now I'm having to come up with other ways to get money out of these qualified accounts. And as you move up the levels, I think that will become more of a consideration, because starting out, if you do nothing and you're on autopilot, yeah, you just go ahead and try to get the match and get what you can in a 401k, you automate it. But I think these discussions are always worth having when you don't agree 100%, because you can start to, I guess, decide that, hey, there's some other ways to look at this depending on what you have going on. And in your case, you had some other things going on where you wish that you could have had access to that money. So did I, retiring early. So I appreciate your alternate view on that.
Well, I would almost fathom a guess that level 3 does not have much in brokerage accounts at all. And they're kind of caught in what we talked about in another episode, maybe this middle class trap. And level 4 probably has significantly more amount of assets in a brokerage account. Would you agree?
Yeah, I'm in level 4, but I have zero home equity. I've never owned a car. Like, I have no like physical assets. Like, everything I own is financial securities. I'm a very weird outlier case, but I agree with you. Most people in level 3, one of their biggest assets is their home, right? And they probably have retirement accounts. And so when you shove all that in there, it's like, okay, I have this home equity sitting here that I can't really access. You can get a HELOC, and there are ways, right? So I'm not going to say you can't access it. And then you have your retirement accounts, which you can only access for certain things before 59 and a half. So if, especially probably your listeners who are trying to get to FI, they're want to do it before 59 and a half, they are going to not be able to access those accounts except for specific things before then. So yeah, maybe maxing your 401k wasn't the thing. If I had known like, oh, I might retire earlier, then I probably should have just put up to the max and then go from there, because you're still going to get a plenty of money in there. You're not going to have to worry as much, right? With compounding and everything, you should still do fine. And if not, you're going to have this huge brokerage account. So you're going to have other flexibility, right? And one last thing I'll say on this, not a lot of people know this, but with a brokerage account, I think with a married couple, it's like you can have like over $100,000. I don't quote me exactly. Maybe it was 124 with the standard deduction and everything. So you can take $100,000 a year in like capital gains and pay no tax on it or something like that. You can look this stuff up. I can't remember the exact number, but with a taxable brokerage account, like the cap gains rate right now is 0% for married filing jointly with the standard deduction. So it's a very high amount. So in theory, you could be taking $100K a year out of your taxable brokerage, whether you're just selling, paying through gains, or if you're just getting dividend income, and you can just tax free. As much as I want to talk about 401ks and the match and all that, like that's something that people don't look into enough. And I think that's something that should be talked about more, because the US government is incentivizing you to use a taxable brokerage account in that case, because you're not paying taxes on your capital gains up to a certain amount.
I mean, people are undereducated about taxable brokerages and don't realize the true powers and how their powers are different from a 401k. And when you talk about the marginal utility of a 401k being 0.75%, if you're paying more than that in fees, maybe you're better off putting that money after the match in a taxable brokerage where you have this capital gains advantage. And people are not educated on this and don't talk about it or think about it, which is why I wanted to bring this up, so that people make educated decisions on where they put their money as far as asset location. Another thing you do that I wanted to at least bring up for our audience is that people talk about rebalancing across their portfolio. And in order to make this easier, you do something a little bit differently with each of your individual accounts to make it easier. What do you do that maybe isn't mainstream?
Yeah, so I think the mainstream advice is like, okay, anything that's going to throw off income of some sort, put that into your retirement account so you're not paying taxes on it. You might hold your stocks in your brokerage account, and then all your bonds you hold in like your tax advantage accounts. I've also heard the flip, which is like actually you want all your stocks in your retirement accounts because they're going to grow at a faster rate and you want to avoid as much capital gains as possible. So I've heard both of those. I've heard kind of both arguments, which is like all stocks in retirement accounts or all stocks in your brokerage. I have a different belief on this. I think all of your accounts should have roughly similar allocations. And so when you rebalance, it's very easy, right? So they're like cookie cutters of each other. The only difference is if you're doing any tax loss harvesting, you have to make sure that the tickers are different. I'm not recommending these tickers. I'm just saying them just as they are similar. But like SPY and VOO, like you want to have both, because if you sell like SPY in your brokerage account to try and tax loss harvest, you don't want to then be rebuying SPY in your IRA or something and create a wash sale or anything. So that's a more technical topic, but for the most part, all of my accounts are the same, or cookie cutters of each other. And that also allows for better rebalancing over time. Because if you have all your bonds are in your retirement account and all your stocks are in another account, when the stocks go down, you can't just take money out of your retirement account and go buy more stocks to rebalance. Because of limitations with retirement accounts, you can't just move money between them very easily. So I think having the same allocation across all of your accounts, or roughly similar, is the way to go, because it's just much simpler that way to just rebalance and manage all your finances. Of course, is that the most optimal way? No, it's not. It's not going to earn you the most money, but I think it's the most optimal in terms of your mental freedom and headache and bothering with that. So I just set the same allocation in every account and I just move on with my life.
And what do you do with rebalancing your taxable account? Because there I have a harder time wrapping my head around selling stocks to buy other assets and incurring the taxes. What do you do with rebalancing a taxable account?
So what I like to do is something called an accumulation rebalance. So you can only do this if you're still saving money. Once you're in retirement, obviously this is not really possible. If you don't have income coming in, I just buy the underweight asset. So I'm always buying more stuff and buying the underweight asset. This is actually a fun fact. Besides rebalancing, where I'm just kind of just rebalancing, I've never sold an investment. The only exception to that is I had individual stocks and I had some meme coins at one point that I got very, very, very small percentage, less than 1% of my portfolio. I tried it out. I said, I'm never doing that again. And I got out. But besides that, all of my index funds, I've never sold them. Not once. So I'm not joking. I just keep buying. And so I just do that over a long period of time. And so, yeah, for me, it's just about accumulation. And yeah, I don't worry about that type of stuff, because when I'm buying more, I just buy the underweight asset, and that usually keeps them pretty in line.
So do you hold bonds and taxable then?
Yeah. I have treasury bills. I have some bond funds, things like that.
Because that's not the typical advice. But the reason you do that is because you can counterbalance that by putting your stocks in pre-tax And you'll see more growth there to counterbalance the ordinary tax on your bonds in taxable, right?
No, trust me. If you want to maximize every dollar, you put all your stocks in your qualified accounts, in your retirement accounts, and you have all your bonds like in your brokerage. Because in theory, like assuming stocks keep growing faster than bonds, which I think is going to happen, right? I don't think anyone's debating that. If we assume that, we assume good growth over the future, like that's going to maximize your wealth, despite the tax hit you get from the bonds, right? But I'm not trying to maximize every dollar. Like with the whole point of the wealth ladder is like, once you get into a level, the difference between 4 million and 5 million is not as big as you think. I know you're like, Nick, that sounds so first world problems out of touch. But if you actually go talk to those households and say, if I gave you $1 million, how much would your life change? Would they go and start flying private? No. They could pay for their kids' education. There's a lot of great things you can do with the $1 million. Don't get me wrong, but your lifestyle is not completely transformed. That's the truth. It's not. If you're at 100,000, I give you $1 million, now your lifestyle's transformed, right? That would change your life a lot. But once you're in level 4, the difference there isn't as large as you think. So as much as I want to tell people maximize every dollar, like you'll start to see as you get more and more money, like that difference is so small. And so I don't want to sit here and have the headache of worrying about where my stuff is. Yes, I pay more in taxes as a result. I think the U.S. government can use the tax money personally, so I don't worry too much about it.
Well, and I appreciate that point, Nick, that you just don't want to take up your headspace to worry about the nuances or to get a slightly better marginal gain. You're fine with it and you acknowledge it. So you're mindfully doing it this way. So our audience should really take heed to that, because there's some people that really don't want to worry about optimizing every single thing. I like that, and the psychology of this whole thing really, really matters. Now we're getting to the higher levels. Now level 5 and 6, those, you said this is the smallest number of people. So why don't we talk about the differences? So level 5 is between 10 million and 100 million. Level 6 is 100 million plus. So give us some of the differences in those two levels.
Since most of us will never achieve that, why are they in this book? Because most Americans probably want to achieve level 4, and I see it as two different levels, where it's 1 to 5 and 5 to 10, where that will differentiate that level, and maybe we can talk about that too. But you have to do something dramatically different to break out of level 4, right?
Besides famous like celebrities, entertainers, athletes who have just really high income because of a very rare skill that they have and they get paid millions of dollars per year, besides those people, we'll say normal people and the rest of the population that gets in there, they're all basically entrepreneurs. They're business owners of some sort. Whether they start their own business and end up selling it for a lot of money, and then after tax, they have over 10 million, or they join a startup really early, get equity, and then that business gets sold, right? So you can even think like NVIDIA is a weird case because that's like became one of the most valuable companies in the world very quickly, but that minted a lot of people into level 5 that probably would have stayed in level 4 had that event not happened. They still would have done well in their lives, but that equity change was so drastic so quickly. Like NVIDIA wasn't talking, it was FANG forever. And then all of a sudden, because of AI and everything, NVIDIA is now the hot stock on the block, one of the most valuable companies in the world. And because of that, it minted all these level 5 people that wouldn't have been in there, right? In terms of what I talk about in level 5 and 6, I don't talk about money too much, actually. I talk about all the non-financial things. And as we talked about amplification, right? I said when you're in level 1, bad luck is amplified, etc. As you kind of go through the wealth ladder, different things get amplified. And by the time you get to level 5 and 6, the things that are amplified are all the non-financial parts of your life. And the reasoning is very simple. You can't buy them, right? You can't write your kid a check and say, hey, love me, or your spouse a check. You can't buy that, right? You can't buy a new cardiovascular system because you've done years of neglecting your health, right? These things matter no matter where you are on the wealth ladder. However, they matter even more in levels 5 and 6 because you can't buy them. That's also, I think, one of the things people that get to level 5 and 6, they have so much wealth. They're very focused on their wealth. They can be. And because of that, they can lose track of all the other things in life, that all the hard work they do, they could sell another company, they can do all that. That's not going to change any of the other types of wealth. And so that's what I try to focus on at level 5 and 6. And so like, yes, the difference between level 5 and 6, like once you start to get into level 5, you can start to fly private. By the time you get to level 6, you can probably even own your own private jet if you want. Whether people want to do that or not is up to them. The consumption thing is, for most experiences, is not that different, right? For some really elevated experiences like a mega yacht or chartering, things like that, level 6 is there. But I think the thing for most people to focus on is like all the non-financial things. And that's true regardless of the wealth levels. But I think in level 5 and 6, I want to wake those people up and be like, hey, like money is not your issue. When you're in level 1, most of your problems are money problems. Once you're in level 5 and 6, money is not your issue, right? It's going to be something else.
And then you talk about 5 general types of wealth in the book that you read too. Can you take us briefly through what those are? Because financial is only one of the 5.
Yeah, so Sahil Bloom came out with a book called The Five Types of Wealth, and his framework was just like, there's different types of wealth. Financial, there's time wealth, there's social wealth, so like your friends, family, relationships. There's physical wealth, and there's mental wealth. Like that's kind of like mental health, etc. And so I just talk about that briefly. I think his book is obviously a much larger look at that, but I just talked about it briefly at the end because I think it's the thing that people kind of overlook, especially as they start to build more and more wealth. Because if you're chasing a number for so long, it's easy to measure. I can open my bank account and say, oh, look, there's the number, right? I can't do that as easily with my health. I can't do that with how good is my relationship with my spouse? How good is my relationship with my friends? We don't have an easy way to track that, right? And because of that, I think it's easy to overlook those things. And so I'm trying to push people's attention back toward it.
Yeah. So, Nick, for the late starters that are catching up to financial independence, so they read this book, I guess, what are some of the important takeaways they might have from the book? Because I got a lot of stuff out of this, and a lot of it was the difference in those early levels or bad luck is amplified and things like that. So for the late starters, any tips on what they might be able to get out of the book on their journey?
Yeah. So I think for a late starter, you have to say, like, hey, where do I want to get to? And everyone's like, oh, well, everyone's going to want to get to level 6. Like, no, I think a lot of people are reasonable and like, okay, to get to level 6, you have to go start a business and do it for many decades and hope it does well. I think people are reasonable and not going to say that. So like, where do you really want to get to? Where do you think you can reasonably get to with like hard work, making some strategy changes, etc.? And then what are the strategies there that you can use to get there? This is not something I put in the book, but my actual take on like starting late, I actually have a very different take than most people do, which is like, if you ask most financial people, like, oh, I've started late, what should I do? Everyone's like, you have to save aggressively, you have to work hard. Like, my take is actually a non-financial answer, which is like, start focusing on your health even more than before, like exercise more. Why am I saying that? Because I want you to get healthier so you have more time where you can work, right? You'll hit your mid 60s, you're not as healthy, you're probably gonna want to retire, you don't have money. Like, because you started late, you're in a bad spot. So by exercising more, you extend your working life. So that gives you more time to save money. You get that time back that you didn't use earlier. That's one thing that's useful. 2, you're going to be healthier, which is just a good thing. I don't think anyone's going to argue against that, right? And so when you think about that, like that's a way to give yourself more time so that you can actually save more, compound more, etc. So I think for a late starter, my take is hit the gym more than you normally would. That's the real way to like basically buy yourself more time because you lost the time earlier. And so that's what I would say for people.
That is great because you're the first person to say something like that. And if I would add one thing, you sort of pair increasing your income as rapidly as you can with increasing your physical fitness, you will shorten your late starter journey to time freedom. I would just add income increasing to your physical health increasing, and you've got the formula for overcoming the late start, I would think, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. If you can increase your income, yeah, do that as well. I'm just assuming that's one thing you have to do. Like that's generally true of wealth building. But yeah, if you're late, you got to do both. But if you can't do anything, at least minimum get your health better, because even with the same income, you're going to have more time to save. You get that time back. So I agree completely.
That's like an instant change or an instant adjustment they can start on. So the book, The Wealth Ladder, so when does it come out and where can we get it? And anything else you want us to know about you?
Yeah, it comes out July 22nd. So depending on when this airs, it'll be either out already or it'll be out by then. And it can be found anywhere books are sold, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, I think Apple Books has it, Target, etc. They're all going to have it. And then about me, if anyone has any questions for me, feel free to reach out to me at Twitter. I'm at Dollars and Data, at Instagram, at Nick Maggiulli, or LinkedIn. So you can find me under all those places. I try to answer every DM. So please feel free if you have a question or like, hey, where you talked about this thing? Where can I find that? I'll probably have a blog post I can send you, etc. So I'm just trying to be helpful.
Well, if you're on Facebook, we invite you to join our community and be one of the experts in the community that answers questions for our late starters. We would be honored if you could do so. Nick, this has been an awesome conversation. I think it's very impactful, full of value. I think this is going to launch our late starters into sort of new ideas because you do think differently, and you think differently because of the data. It isn't just opinion. It's opinion based on fact. And that's why we want to direct people to read your books, join your blog, and embrace a data-driven journey.
I truly appreciate that. Thank you both for having me on.
Oh, it's been awesome. We'll see you hopefully again to talk about more financial topics on Catching Up to Fight. Jackie, any final words for our audience?
No, just that this is a super smart guy that I've been reading his material for a very long time. We're honored to have him today, and we will catch you next time on Catching Up to Fight. So, Bill, as you know, we cannot do this show without our amazing staff and the people that help us put this on. Our social media maven is Diana Falk, and our editor is Fritz Brazard. We love them, and they keep us going.
Yeah, Jackie, I mean, this show wouldn't have the quality it has without our folks, our peeps. And we'd also like to give you a few calls to action for the show. We love our community, and we hope you love us back. If you would like to support the show and our mission to help late starters, you can do that at Buy Me a Coffee, which is a platform that allows you to make a donation. The link is in the show notes and on the website.
Check out the show notes for resources mentioned in today's show. Also, head on over to our website at catchinguptofy.com and check out our vetted resources, partners, and affiliates for discounts and their services, because we love sharing great deals.
Please share the show with others and head on over to our Facebook community to help us grow. If you prefer video, head on over to YouTube and watch the show there. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Catching Up to Fi. We would appreciate it if you could also leave us a 5-star review to help our message reach others.
And while we are financial educators that love to teach, remember that our content is for general education and information purposes only. We are not providing financial, legal, or tax advice. Always do your own research or consult a professional before making important decisions.
So, Jackie, we'll see our audience next time on Catching Up to Fi. Cheers.